So, ZombieGrub, thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So how did you get started with StarCraft?
I was always into video games, and Blizzard games were the only ones that worked on the Macintosh that I had. So I was a console gamer for a long time. And I got into Warcraft and arcade games, and actually did not play Brood War except on the Nintendo 64. And so I knew what it was, and I knew the company, and StarCraft 2 came out. My brothers said they were going to get it, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll get it. And I guess I just decided to pick it up. So because I'd actually played through the campaign on the PC by that time. So back in 1990, whatever, 8, I guess, 99 on 64, it was Brood War. And then 2005 or something, I finally got it on PC. And then it was like still, it was an okay game. But I decided StarCraft 2 looked interesting enough, so I picked it up.
Did you ever get really deeply invested in any other games or communities?
No, sometimes I wonder what would happen if I'd known what esports was earlier on. Either get into the Brood War scene, which I ended up getting into almost retroactively, and then if I'd been the person to get into a Smash scene, because like many, I was very good at Smash on the N64 of the community. Right, beat my brothers and I beat my friends, but
Yeah, yeah.
no idea about the competition. No idea at all about there being any type of esports out there. Thought it was a joke mostly. Maybe I'd watch something on like um G4 TV, and that's kind of what I knew about competition. So getting into StarCraft 2 and then YouTube, like going to YouTube and searching how to get better basically, right? Got me into this whole world of esports.
Yeah, I remember when my friend first started talking to me about StarCraft 2 around 2010, and he was showing me all of the professional tournaments and stuff, and there was some CNN article that called StarCraft like the de facto national sport of South Korea.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, that kind of blew my mind. I also definitely thought esports were a joke up until that point. Um, so there's been a post here and there every year or so. I would say the last couple of years that kind of calls you out as maybe like the best caster in the community.
Oh.
How do those posts make you feel?
Yeah, I think it's a very recent thing that's been going on. I talked a little bit last year, I think, or maybe shortly before last year, about how how the the COVID era actually gave me a lot of opportunities. So I don't know how much better of a commentator I was really getting year after year, but I do know that when COVID came around and we all forced to be online, the production at the time and the people hiring just genuinely liked me, so they liked what I was doing. And then I had also said that I wanted to host more. I'm going to give hosting a try since I had started leading between like the duo of the casts, and they remembered that and they're like, well, we're going to have hosts for this thing, so do you want to do that? So I got a lot of days because initially it also didn't expand the pool of casters. I got a lot of days. I got a lot of experience. I got to experience hosting and added kind of that skill to my resume, but then also all the skills that come with hosting to blend into my casting. I was on in front of people a lot. And I had said sometime last year in a Reddit post, like, I don't know if I really got all that much better or if it really is just the fact that I'm constantly there basically at this point. So people very much expect to see me. And I think this was a post about me doing the finals a lot or something like that. And I still kind of think about that I wonder if I really am a much better commentator than I was like in 2019, I suppose, or if it really was just this kind of, because I certainly think, is my opinion, that there is a amount of favoritism given to someone who just appears all the time, right? As long as they're not hated every single time they appear. If people were like, yeah, okay, good enough, then I think the more that you appear, the more that people just kind of accept you. So people who were complaining at one point maybe won't complain anymore. But then that doesn't really explain more people being more emphatic about their enjoyment of my casting. So, anyways, I think about that all the time when I read these posts, and I'm like, maybe you guys just get used to me at some point. But then I also think, of course, all the times that I was able to do all the hosting and the casting for the online stuff, that was the exact type of practice that I wanted to be doing for so much of my StarCraft career, because before that, you were getting hired for one, maybe two LAN events. And for me, I got hired for like challenger stuff, but even then that wasn't a lot of work. So every time I'd finish an event, I'd be really excited and invigorated to improve. But then I'd have to wait like 3 months to cast another event. And yeah, I could cast stuff online, sometimes with a co-caster, but it just was never the same. So I think that did absolutely help me, again, blending all these skills, really getting out of my comfort zone. I was very much purposefully also trying to improve my play-by-play, which was always something that people had said was, basically where I wasn't good at, Certainly in the beginning of my career, lots of complaints of monotony. And that kind of started to show around 2019. In 2020 and 2021, I think I just did a great job of continuing to improve that and making sure to get really meshing well with all my co-casters, which we were already doing, but again, on such infrequent scenarios, two events out of the year, right? That I think that really helped. And then for Katowice last year, I did do a decent amount of prep work. I had begun actually trying to prepare for my events because I was seeing other esports commentators talk about it, and I was kind of wondering if it would be useful for StarCraft, even though a lot of other StarCraft people don't do it. And I think I found that worked for me. Up until that point, I would have always identified as someone who was not one to take notes or, get the highlighter out or the ink pens or whatever. But then I got really interested in it for StarCraft. And that also really helped. And then, so last year's Katowice just kind of was a real magical, like, culmination of a lot of things I had learned up until that point, and the work that I put in, taken down a notch because of the severe complications that were happening at that time. COVID still rampaging, and then Ukraine getting invaded. That was a tough event. But people really liked it, and that was one of the first times I got that, like, a Reddit thread saying, I think she's one of the best commentators we have, which I was very appreciative of. But then I got it again, like, I guess like a couple of weeks ago. So maybe why you're bringing this up. And I was so surprised by it because it was literally almost like the exact same time as last year. I wonder if I was being trolled. But again, it was just someone really excited, and they wanted to share something positive. And again, most, if not all, the comments were all positive at the very least. They were like, oh, I'm not my cup of tea, but, she's fine, which is great. So I think it makes me feel proud because I really did feel like a lot of the feedback for this past Katowice was positive, that a lot of people were making an effort to tell me that I did good, which was very nice. And I had put together a plan of 8-week program to prepare for this. So it really felt like I'd done the thing, right? I'd taken my skill leading up to that point of the last 10 years of casting, whatever, really honed in on it, took all of the skills I learned over the last few years and talking to so many people in the esports scene for my podcast. And I put it together with an 8-week improvement plan. And I thought it went really well. And people apparently thought it went really well, even though they didn't know I was doing that. All of the feedback from Katowice was great. And then to have that post come up, I was again reminded, just like, yeah, I do feel good about what I did, even though I know there's things that I had to improve on. I do feel good, but then I'm also kind of scared. I was bringing this up on stream. Whenever I think of like someone in the media, right? Like someone in the public presence, and that kind of overwhelming amount of love starts coming at them, I feel like there's always that inevitable point where like things go sideways and they topple down. And I think it's not like someone suggested it was imposter syndrome. I don't think it's that. I think it's just that idea that I don't know for a fact what I'm doing, right? And I have so much experience, and I've worked with a lot of people, I've asked people a lot of questions. At the end of the day, people have general ideas, but you can't math every person's opinion. So if you do this, you'll get this reaction. So it is kind of scary, actually, getting the light shown on you as being very good. Because then I guess I'm thinking more people will be more critical, or the inevitable, demise will come, right? They'll be like, no, she's always been overhyped, like, I don't know why people like her.
I think everybody
So
has
kind
a
of
peak.
scary.
Yeah, like in terms of public opinion, in terms of like, performance as well. I think everybody has a peak, so it's scary to feel like, oh, like, am I hitting my peak? Am I about to fall off?
Yeah. That too. That too. So yeah, it's definitely a funny mixture though, because I am proud, and then I'm also kind of scared. So
I mean, no, listen, that was a very comprehensive answer. So do you think being a woman made it more difficult for you in the gaming industry?
yeah, it's a very complicated question, right? And entire talk shows and studies have been done about this. For me, I think I was in a very good position um for what the challenges are usually for a woman or just a minority in the scene. And by that, I mean at a very stable family structure with parents who encourage me to be rebellious to a certain extent, but basically to have the capacity to say, no, fuck you, you're wrong. So I was a bit more combative than maybe people expected. And that also gave me the opportunity to just be like, no, like, you're crazy, right? If someone was like, wow, woman can't commentate, I cannot mentally take that to heart like at all because it's so absurd,
Yeah.
right? But I'm not blaming anyone who doesn't. I can absolutely see if someone said that to a woman casting that they would be like, well, that made me feel bad. I'm going to ignore you and I'm going to move on. But that made me feel bad. Those types of comments will make me feel bad. I actually kind of laugh at them. And at some point, I also got in with a group of people that I think were really quite good about shutting those people down. There's always this thing that happens with my experience and talking to other women. If you join anything that's male dominated, you've really made it when the other guys start to defend you, which is an unfortunate thing, of course. But I played rugby and some guy came in after like a couple of weeks off and he was like, who's this chick? Why is she here? And it was co-ed, so I wasn't not supposed to be there. And the other guys were like, nah, she's cool, man. And then he was like, okay, I guess. And that happened for StarCraft. Very quickly, I would say, by the time I actually put my voice out there so that people would know, I'm a woman. Pretty quickly, I had people in chat being like, no, like you're stupid, like shut it down. So I think, like I said, I want to say that I had a lot of things in my life go correctly to combat things that would push people away, right? And there's actually this really cool study that was being done by someone who worked at Blizzard, but I don't think she ended up releasing it, about exactly where a woman would go off the path of being a pro gamer. And it was really interesting because it basically started with like, how do you get the young kid into a video game? What stops a little girl from getting into that? What stops them when they get to middle school? What stops them when they get into high school? What stops them when they get into university? What stops them when they get into a amateur scene? What stops them when they get into a semi-pro scene? And they listed all these things that the woman would drop out of, right? So if she didn't manage to find a support group, a club that was accepting in high school, it was incredibly likely that she was going to drop off that path, more so than guys, I expect. But again, that was never released. So I do think that being a woman in any like male dominated market and public facing as well is going to come with more barriers. And it really depends on, I think, your background, your upbringing, you as a person, and whether or not you're going to be able to knock those down. And if anyone out there is like, well, if you just don't have the willpower for it, you don't have the willpower for it. I don't think you're imagining just how much shit can be thrown your way at every stage of that life. Every stage of my life, I did stuff that boys only did and had to break through that and get the acceptance. And then that bolstered my confidence to do it again at the next stage, the next male-dominated thing. So I do think it's harder in general. For me, I would say my experience was kind of okay. I had the typical pushback, and I do definitely get comments that are only about my gender and why I can't do X, Y, or Z. You do get very annoying questions. You get kind of annoying people in general. In terms of whether or not I would get hired, I can't really speak too much more about that. But I know a lot of people out there would either say as tactfully and professionally as possible, it is a benefit that you're a woman. And I can't necessarily disagree with that. There are a lot of opportunities that, pop up where they're like, we want a woman because we want to, not be all white, all male cast. But it's one opportunity compared to the 7 other white male casters that usually exist on these panels. And I know for at least me, basically as a fact, me being a woman did not help me get any jobs, which is another thing that really I get quite the laugh from when people are accusing me of getting jobs because I'm a woman. And my reasoning for it makes me feel pretty confident in this, because everyone has their doubts. Why was I hired? Everyone can have those doubts. But for me, the confirmation was that I got hired to do BlizzCon 2017. And I was like, wow, this was really quick. This is really awesome. Probably even too quick. But I did it. And then 2018, they did not invite me again. And it would have been very easy for them to not easy. It would have been, I don't know how to say this. People could have easily expected them to say, we need a woman. That's not Smix, I guess.
Yeah,
but they didn't. So I really don't think that was a decision in any of their hiring processes. And that year sucked, and the next year sucked too. And I also didn't get hired for BlizzCon again. But both of those things, to me at least, kind of, took away that fear. If I ever was like, oh, am I only being contacted because I'm a woman? Like, this kind of sucks. I don't feel that anymore. So that's yeah, I think it kind of answered your question. Yeah. It generally is hard to be a minority in the scene, but I don't think I went through too much trouble personally.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a lot of logic to that sentiment that, like, that's why you've gotten these premier gigs, in the sense that, like, we were lucky enough in the Starcraft community to have like trailblazers like Scarlet, right? That like acquainted a lot of Starcraft people with transgenderism kind of a long time ago by like societal standards.
Yeah.
And other really successful females in the community like Smix, like Yuri, who have been sort of like, community fixtures for a long time. But none of them are commentators, right? Like,
right.
If the industry or if the Starcraft scene was trying to shoehorn in women into the commentary role, we would have seen it before you, right? And there was a couple.
Yeah.
But no mainstays.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very good point as well. Because there were a lot of, I would say even back when I first started, I would say that there was a lot of women who were kind of on like this, the not quite the surface. They weren't quite getting brought up to those broadcasts, but I recall so many names, like, there was Caitlyn, Livy B still streams. There was Flo, who became an observer, right? I mean, there was actually a decent amount. Iluge, that's I was trying to remember. Someone's name was backwards. It was Iluge. She got brought up on stage for something. There's a decent amount of women because it was also the only esport. I don't think it's comparable to what maybe Valorant or League of Legends has now, especially with Valorant, pushing so much on the woman front. But yeah, and they didn't get brought up completely. And, for a while, I would even imagine that was actually a big fear for some people. I don't know for a fact, but I would actually imagine that we kind of went through a couple of stages in TO's minds where they were like, well, we kind of want to hire a woman, but if we hire a woman and then people don't like her and say it's because she was a woman, then we've just created all this shit show, and we might have ruined expectations for the other women that come up. So I can even imagine it being a bit of a conundrum at some point. And in that conundrum, at no point is it really that great of a thing. I think the amount of times that the job opportunities of, well, we need a woman actually happens is quite low. And I certainly don't think any woman is making a career out of these things, out of jobs that only say, well, we need a woman really badly. Like, they have to have the skill set.
Of course. How do you think you ended up making the jump from like more of a community caster to like all the premier stages?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's, it's obviously very Starcraft specific. I think a lot of esports have a lot of different stories for that one. I think it was a mixture of a lot of stuff. Base trade TV undeniably was a very important part of Starcraft history. At the time of Heart of the Swarm, beginning of Legacy of the Void, we were definitely the biggest community streamer, and a lot of the time we were the people who were really keeping a I don't know, a fire burning to a certain degree, because
Yeah.
those were kind of some bad years, you know. There is some real like oppressive hanging darkness sometimes, even with Legacy of the Void on Horizon. So, you know, we did I think Rifkin was a good businessman in a lot of sense, and maybe not so good in some other senses. And we worked well together. And so we made this big community organization that I think was really necessary for that time. So I was kind of famous anyways. I wasn't just coming up from doing like really small tournament to really small tournament to really small tournament. We even did our own LAN. And one of the reasons we did Hell It's About Time was to say that we got experience, because no one else was giving us an opportunity to get experience offline, which didn't really result in very much for a very long time. But I think I was there. I was proven likable by the community because of that. You know, it wasn't just a crapshoot of whether they brought someone up, would they be liked by the community? They kind of knew what to expect when they hired me. I became friends with a lot of the people. Nepotism. But I became friends with a lot of the people, so they knew that I would be easy to work with, that I wasn't dramatic or, you know, a douchebag or something like that. And then I got a couple of people who really enjoyed my work and who I was very good friends with, such as Maynard, who actually very much was telling people, he was telling people who were hiring, you should hire this person, which was really nice of him. And I think the other commentators had basically had no qualms with that. I don't know if they were also as emphatic of it, but they didn't have any qualms with it. And then I caught the eye of someone at DreamHack, the producer at the time, who she was very keen because she was looking for more woman talent. She actually now does the CSGO Impact League. So
Oh,
she's
nice.
super cool. And anyways, so she apparently had seen my stuff and she was just interested in meeting this girl, and then she asked, like, why aren't we hiring her? And I don't think there was ever a straight answer, but she even came to me at one event. I finally met her and she's like, oh, you're her. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And she was like, why aren't you casting? And she just like straight up asked me that. And I was like, no one's, you know, no one's asked me. Like, I don't know. And then she's a very like direct person, you know, she just says what's on her mind. But she actually said, you know, it's probably because you're a woman. And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's the reason. Like, that doesn't sound right in there. Like, no, you know, it happens a lot. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure there's a reason you aren't being hired, and it's not because of your skill. I watched you. And I was like, oh, that's, you know, very nice of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll never know if she had a point or anything. I still don't think that was actually the case because there's so many things that were happening. But to answer your original question, I think I built the skill set to be good enough to try out. I think I had a safe brand, basically, is kind of what it came down to. Again, they knew the community would react to me as generally positive. And I made the connections, which is usually the biggest thing that people talk about.
For sure.
So, and I was just constantly there too, I think is another big thing, right? What's unfortunate though is that you really have to have, you know, like 3 out of 4 of those or something, right? Because some people try to always be there, always doing casting, always doing streaming, but really to no effect. You know, they're still streaming to 10 people, they're still casting to 20 people. So you need other things going on, right? And I think I just came in at a time where those 4 things were rolled together nicely, at a time where they were looking to include new talent. Because Fear Dragon was the first one they brought up as new talent, and then I came after.
Okay. So, do you ever, or like, did you at some point stop feeling starstruck when interacting with certain members of talent or like pro players?
Kind of. Gosh, I guess so, right? Because it's actually been a while since I've been starstruck. The last time I was really, truly starstruck was probably when I met Boxer in 2015. However, that was just, you know, that's like, we're talking like actual, just like, oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
I still thought it was really cool and I was very honored. And I am using the correct word. When I got to meet iNcontroL, I was really, and my experiences with him were kind of funny leading up to it. I knew that I would like him. You know, I liked his content, and I heard good things about him, even though he would occasionally go overboard on some jokes. But one of the first times we actually met in real life, it was after a particularly bad night of drinking for me, and he had heard about it. And I like we're doing a guest cast at Austin, Texas, me and Rifkin, and he was sitting on the sideline playing Clash of Clans or something, and he was like, "Rough night, ZombieGrub." And I was like, "Oh, you heard about it?" And then the next time I worked with them for Montreal, my first event, Ravi Fear Dragon had actually warned me kind of about like the atmosphere and kind of what would happen. So I was like ready. I was like, I'm going to impress this guy, right? This guy that I've watched for years, I think is really cool and really funny, and I'm not going to let him like bully me. So when I came off my first broadcast, I walked past him, and again, he's like scrolling on his phone is like such a like his face is just if you knew it, you knew it. But he kind of like looked up and looked back down. And I was like, not your best. This is the first thing I hear after my first cast on the like, big stage. But I kind of expected it. So, you know, I turned around, I looked at him, and I was like, oh man, that actually makes me feel really bad. I was really hoping to impress you, you know? Like, sorry, I didn't do very well. And he looked at me and he was like, well, I feel like a dick. And so that was, I think, one of the moments where I can think of wanting to impress someone, you know, like that type of dynamic. And then I think I was kind of like very shy about meeting Smix. And I really wanted her to like me, but it was super easy. She's a really friendly person. And then I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything in the last few years. So I'm definitely happy meeting some people, but I don't think I'm starstruck. So there's that. I'm excited to meet someone that I haven't been able to talk to, but I don't think it's starstruck.
Yeah, it's funny. Even for me at this point, obviously, I've just talked to like a few personalities making this content over the last few months or so. But yeah, no, it's not that I'm starstruck. I just don't want to come across as weird sometimes, especially when you meet somebody in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that totally makes sense that you'd be a bit numb to that at this point.
I have it with other esports. Does that count? No, it's only
Oh, that's pretty
Starcraft.
interesting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, Semmler is not really cool nowadays, but when I was doing Challenger, he was there too doing Overwatch League. This was years ago, right? And I walked by him with Fear Dragon, and I heard him say, "Dude, is that ZombieGrub?" And I was like, oh. And apparently he's a big Starcraft fan, and he was watching the Challenger stuff. And I met Simple at a very unfortunate time, of course, for last year's Katowice. And I just saw him in the corner on his phone, looking understandably sad. And I couldn't help myself. I didn't do anything, but what I couldn't help was just being like, so yeah, it definitely happens with still some people, and there might even be a couple that I can't think of that I absolutely would have been starstruck by. I just haven't gotten the opportunity to meet them, and I've forgotten about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I was in the Amsterdam airport with my girlfriend, just before this Katowice. I saw Roddy just walking from the bathroom or whatever, and I was just like, "Oh, that's Roddy," and I'm like, "I'm pretty sure he heard me," and I'm like, "Tell me, don't look at him, don't look at him."
Funny.
Okay, so how do you feel about? I mean, I know you just did like a 3-hour stream about this, but how do you feel about the EPT changes that were announced?
Right. They make sense for the situation. It was a huge bummer. Blizzard kind of pulled a HOTS again, and that is Heroes, not Heart. Where they were basically supposed to go ahead with it, and then at the last second they said, well, no. And we don't really know why. So it was a bit of a rug pull for people behind the scenes, but they were very careful and good about saying, well, it's not finished yet, it's not signed yet. So when we heard that was happening through the grapevine before it was officially announced, it was hugely depressing, and we really didn't know what it was going to mean. And then they announced they were still going to continue it. ESL was still going to support it. And I just thought that was really cool of them. There's sometimes where, well, to be honest, I don't understand esports financials at all. I've always said that I never understand them.
Because they're very fishy.
It's very fishy, and then I also don't have that experience, from the top looking down on a tournament organization. So, yeah. But sometimes I think maybe StarCraft 2 isn't doing so bad, and I think we could be getting more sponsors, but that's a whole other topic. The thing I mostly think of as a Twitch leaks. You know, StarCraft 2 was third most popular ESL Twitch stream, CS:GO and CS:GO B being 1 and 2. So I was like, okay, well, it's making some money, and you know, I think there's also the kind of brand value, and I think Pig has talked extensively about how that is non-cash monetary, like it's good to have that, right? Public goodwill, and then
Prestige.
also prestige, exactly. So sometimes I'm like, okay, I guess it kind of makes sense that they want to support us. But then other times, you know, I look at the viewership and I have a somewhat of idea of how much money they would make, and I'm like, and even with those Twitch leaks, you know, like we learned that they make basically $100,000 per year. But that's like there's a prize pool and the casters. So you know, there's question marks. So I just thought it was really cool. You know, I hope that there is a legitimate reason that they were talking about, that this might be what we can continue on with for the next few years. But it is what it is. It's downsizing, and what we downsized to, I think, was really the biggest question. And I think I agree with what they downsized to, which is basically downsizing as in cutting off people who weren't really going to be making a career out of this anytime soon anyways. And career is a very loose word, so that's not exactly accurate, but you know, who weren't going to be top 32 of the world anyways, is maybe the best way to put it. And that does discourage growth for the future, but I think it also highlights the current. It means that we have very exciting matches with the fan favorites on stream a lot, basically guaranteed. And we encourage the scenes that are doing well viewership wise, participation wise, and player wise, up and coming talent wise, which is primarily Europe. So I agree with everything they've done. I know it sucks, but I think cutting out some of the regions just makes sense. And I think that leaving Europe as the most populated region, the most dedicated to region, still makes sense. I still think it's really should be given credit to them for choosing to still go ahead with Atlanta after last year. They definitely weren't talking about doing Atlanta in talks last year. I think the initial plan was to be in maybe Valencia again, or something like that, Sweden and Valencia. But Atlanta just blew one out of the water, so they were like, we're going to make sure to go to Atlanta. So I think that should really be given a lot of credit to them for. And otherwise, yeah, I think the correct perspective is thinking of this as accepting that they're on that high tier of the esport. They're the big top dog production. They're building the best tournaments, and they're including the best players. And then they can't really afford to do much else. As opposed to an alternative, which would be continuing to support the smaller scenes now with an even much smaller prize pool that also drags down the prizes of the other regions, and possibly, you could argue, drags down some of the broadcast quality, because some of the people who would make it through the previous system didn't exactly create the best games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't really criticize them a lot. I will criticize their open LAN participation numbers. I don't know why they cut down the tickets for the open LAN portion of DreamHack down to 32. Was it? That doesn't make any sense to me, but I've ranted a lot about that recently.
Yeah, if people are willing to get there on their own, then why not allow them to participate?
Yeah, they pay a decent ticket price. So it's not like they're doing this for free. If it's hiring maybe one more admin, getting so much more table space, including a couple more PCs, they can make it bring your own computer, and I think that'd still be okay. And those are the real expenses that I can think of.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like you get more money by letting people buy those tickets, but anyways.
Yeah, no, that is curious. So what are your thoughts and feelings on the GSL reductions?
Well, my feeling is, incredibly sad, but I also knew it was coming. I've been saying for a couple of years now at this point that if we're going to have a bad time, the worst time is going to be with Korea. It's always been apart away from the main circuit, right? So WCS, I guess they tried calling it WCS Korea for a while, but like no one took that. And then EPT. And that was originally a good thing. And I still think overall a good thing. I still think having it remain as it always was for that historical, prestigious value made a lot of sense. And I don't think folding them into the EPT circuit would have helped them anyways. But the point is, it's always kind of been alone all by itself. And it's always had some of the lowest local viewership, right? The amount of actual Korean people watching StarCraft 2 is very low. And the players were quickly disappearing. We really are having a tough time now thinking of non-top 16 players. And that was an issue 2 years ago at top 24. And it was an issue 4 years ago at top 36. Like, it's not exactly been slow, honestly, that it's not doing so hot. So it sucks because Korea obviously has created so many storylines. It's such a great place to visit. I love visiting it. I wish that esports and StarCraft 2 would continue on there. I would hope that there would be something like Brood War in StarCraft 2 for Korea, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And I really hope that, like, Stormgate, for instance, helps out. I know some of the Koreans were even quite emotional about it, that they're, for them, they told Frost Giant, Stormgate is what's going to keep me as a pro gamer. Because even they were expecting big cuts. So very sad, but very understandable. There's just, could they have done a better job over the last decade trying to appeal to a bigger audience or get international sponsors or do some type of crowdfunding, which apparently they're now open to? There's always a maybe there, but it never really happened organically for StarCraft 2 in South Korea in the same way that it did for Europe and North America.
Definitely didn't. Would you still consider the foreign scene to be like pretty healthy?
Kind of, yeah. I guess it really depends what you mean by healthy. But I think so. I think Europe still holds a lot of promise. And, a lot of that reason is because of just Europe being Europe, as in it's close together, so you can get to more tournaments. And it has a better social safety net. I do actually sometimes wonder if America was the same size, if I could travel to California in 7 hours.
If we had good trains.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would have helped, but I'm still guessing I would not go from East Coast to West Coast on a train to participate in lands.
Yeah.
I maybe. But anyways,
if it went 200 miles an hour.
Yeah. Then there's a maybe, and then if there is again more social safety nets for North Americans, I think that they also could have had a fairly healthy scene. I definitely think North America is it's a web, man. There's so many things that affected it. There's so many things that could have been better. There's so many things that you really can't avoid. But yeah, anyways, I think the European scene is healthy. I think North America really isn't all that bad, but I do think our perception of it definitely has to change. Like, we're expecting the same number of professionals, like the same quality of top 10 players between Europe and North America. That just isn't really the case. We have maybe top 4 of the, like Estrella and Scarlet. I guess now Special and Kelazur, because they're part of it too.
Yeah.
And then Trigger, Neeb retired.
Yep.
We got them, and that's fantastic. But then the people below, kind of a certain degree, like Nina and Disc, Vindicta, some of those names. I think the expectation is that we appreciate the work they put in and the quality of games that they bring, but we don't necessarily expect to have this huge pool of talent and continually rising talent as well. So we just kind of accept it for what it is, as opposed to, I think what I'm getting at is that we need to get rid of some of this perception that we built up in 2010, which is that North America would once someday be like all the players all over the world coming to them and then participating in North American events and being from North America, I guess most importantly. And I think if you take away that vision of the future, if you just say, okay, what is it now? Okay, it's pretty good. I would say it's healthy in a fashion.
I guess the question was, do you think like most of the, like when we say like top 32 foreigners, do you think like that many people will still be able to play StarCraft full time with this system?
Oh, okay. That's a more direct question. Here's the thing about that question. I don't really know how they've done it the last 3 years, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you actually look at numbers for a lot of our top professional players, so let's say top 32 in the world, let's just go with that.
Yeah.
The amount of money they make is like top six, I think, make a decent amount of money with those big $100,000 payouts for first place, you know. But you go to the 16th place guy, and it maybe is more than minimum wage.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know how to really answer that question because even that, you know, having a career is very flexible word. So I think for this year, we're going to have a very similar amount of people putting in a similar amount of time than compared to last year. I think it'll be quite similar. And then towards the tail end of the year, especially if nothing changes, we'll have people dedicating less time and being considered more of like a semi-pro.
That's fair. Um, did you expect to see so much community support for stuff like KSL, like Wardi's Korean Royale?
Mm. I did not expect this much because there have been other community events that try to get community funding that are good ideas, but they don't get this much money. But of course, never before in StarCraft 2's history has the Korean scene taken such a brutal hit. I mean, this wasn't a death by a thousand cuts, so people kind of didn't see it coming or something like that. Even though I did see something bad coming, if something had to be cut, it was going to be Korea. Even I wasn't going to say an 80% reduction. Like that was huge. So I think that was the real cat. Like people paid attention at that point, right? People with money paid attention, thankfully. So yeah, in that sense, I guess it is expected. If someone is, if a lot of people are aware of it, and a lot of people still want it, or let's say a pool of people still want it, and they're StarCraft 2 fans, they're either a little better well off, which is great, and they give big money, or they're still in a comfortable place in their life where they don't mind throwing money in. And I think we've always said that, you know, the older population for StarCraft 2 has, I think, been a net positive for like monetary support, but negatives in some other ways, like community interaction, so stuff like that.
It's kind of insane when you look at the numbers, like for either of those tournaments I just mentioned. Like the pool of donors is like 300 people.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well,
insane.
that's a large number of people. And then, you know, there's a couple of people in that pool that are throwing in $1,000 per person. We
Yeah.
know that. So it just, again, it doesn't surprise me if you told me the exact scenario. If you told me tomorrow Korea is going to get cut by 80%, all the players are going to be wondering what the hell they're going to do with their lives. People are going to be concerned for them and translating all of their really sad Twitch streams. What does StarCraft 2 community do? I would have called this, I think. But previously, there had not been that much support for community funded events. But the timing does make sense.
Do you think community funded events like this are going to keep a lot of Koreans active?
I think what they're going to do is keep them, yeah, active. Yeah, I guess active is the best word. I think it's going to keep them basically living. Like, if you had nothing for the Koreans except GSL and whatever Open Cup they could participate in, like the EPT Open Cups, I think you're talking about, what is it, like if you win GSL, you make the same
It's
amount
like
you would win one GSL?
$7,600.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, like we're talking about people legitimately not just having to think, well, maybe in the future I'll have to get a job. We're think of people who had only those two options would probably more so, except for maybe Maru and, you know, Dark, I guess. Like most of the other guys would literally have to think about getting a job next week.
Yeah.
Like there's no way. So I do think this will keep them afloat, which is really, I think, all you could ask for. Even if one person tried to get all the forces combined to make
Yeah.
one huge tournament, you're still not going to match the prize pool that Blizzard could give.
Yeah, no, total prize pool for the year for GSL is like 75K, and then the average income for somebody in Seoul is like 40K. So
Mm,
it's like not enough for two people.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's a little depressing. Okay. Do you think the return of players like Innovation, SOS, and Stats to StarCraft 2 change anything? Like I guess what I mean is the return of big names after their military service to StarCraft 2. Do you think that changes the future of the Korean scene at all?
Unfortunately, I gotta say no. I think when Brood War, if we do compare it to Brood War, because the similar situation happened in that popular players went to military and had to come back. Obviously, the surrounding circumstances are very different. But one of the things that made them continue, get apparently hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of balloons was not that they were good pro gamers or that their old name still held that much weight. Is that their old name gave them enough weight that if they actively engage with a streamer lifestyle, they would do well. And that's what a lot of them did. It was a bit of a slow start, I think, and then people kind of caught on. And so you have all of those professional players with their own YouTubes, and I think with a lot of them with their own editors. Like they're streamer productions at this point, and they're still very freaking good at the game, and they still have a couple of tournaments every now and again. So I'm not trying to say they're full sellout mode, but they brought that with them. They brought a fan base with them, and then they interacted with each other, and they made events happen with each other. If Innovation and Stats and Sue and SOS came back and had 700 viewers say like, wow, that's awesome, I'm so glad they're back, which is like an okay amount.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, let's ride this high. Let's go for it. Let's start doing our own like little Korean barbecue, meetups and chat about really important stuff. And let's create our own little academy league, which happened in Brood War. And let's be really entertaining streamers, and let's make this a big part of our careers. I think it might have been different for not just their livelihoods, but also the amount of attention they'd bring into StarCraft 2 from the general public. But, I think more so what's happening is Innovation comes back, and then 700 foreigner fans,
Yeah.
myself included, are like, yeah! But that's really it. Not any Korean conversation starting.
Yeah. So, for example, like people like TY, I've heard that they say that he's going to come back and play Brood War and SC2 professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's going to be like genuinely competitive in both?
Yeah, I think he'll be generally competitive in both. TY, incredibly talented. He was baby at one point, very, very young professional Brood War player. It's in his DNA basically when you start that young and you do that much work. So he also has never been a particularly fast player, which I think is one of the biggest concerns, not just because of old school Brood War thought processing. You have to have 400 APM or you're never going to be good. But also just because, life usually gets in the way and mechanics are one of the first things to fade. Your brain, your big brain strats can still be okay. But yeah, you watch him stream, and in both Brood War and StarCraft 2, he's really not that fast, but he is very accurate. And I think that puts him with his previous training and his style of play in terms of his build order choices and his strategic thinking. I think it makes him one of the best contenders for a cross-game professional player.
So what are your expectations for StormGate?
Oh, yeah, okay. My expectations for StormGate is that it'll be a very well-crafted game. I actually have a lot of faith in what they're doing, and not just because they are people who, a lot of them helped make StarCraft 2. A lot of them were heavily involved in StarCraft 2, and I forget my third reason. They're good people, I guess. But also because I've talked to them, and I agree with like 99% of their ideas. And then the ideas I don't agree with, I'm not even sure they're going through with. So it's possible I agree with all their ideas. But I don't think that translates into a very successful esport. I also love their approach to esports, which I don't think has been revealed yet so much, even though there's been a billion interviews, so maybe it has. But even then, even as they try to marry, that free-to-play with esports that, League of Legends was able to do to create the kind of cycle, keep on going back. I just don't know if you can really get that gust of wind to boost you along, right? It seems very much it's got to be a lightning in the bottle type of moment.
Yeah.
for a non super established publisher developer with a established history in esports too, that like works with like an established tournament organizer to make a actual career building esport. People being content creators about it, that can happen for really any game. It happens for tons of games out there. Being interested in it and at a very active level and always coming back to it and having a decently high player base, I think that can absolutely happen. I think it could win awards for how good the game is. But actually getting to hit that special moment that just suddenly catches the attention of a lot of people and rides that high and continues growing, I think it's extremely difficult. So best expectations for me, very solid game, good community outreach, good community participation from like the diehards and whatever casuals they end up bringing in, and then a very slow build-up. Very slow. Like, if I had to give numbers, like the first alpha is the alpha tournament's like 40,000 viewers, which is actually pretty good, but again, it's like the first thing we see from it. And then their first actual tournament after the beta has been finished, maybe again 40K, and then probably drop down to 20K. And then they build up again over like years, which isn't terrible. It's not terrible. And I'm using Starcraft numbers, so actually it sounds pretty good. Yeah. But I'm just saying, for people who want it to be the thing that pushes RTS past StarCraft 2 or pushes it up to the level of like a Valorant or a League of Legends, I mean, I just think that's basically impossible.
That's one of the most sober answers I've gotten from a question like that. So I appreciate that. Yeah, no, a lot of people have talked about how like they're going to switch over as a pro gamer and stuff like that. And that's awesome. And I would love to see it. But yeah, I also agree that it, I don't want to get my hopes up too high that we're going to have a community that's anywhere near what StarCraft was around Stormgate. Yeah. So that kind of ties into the last question. Do you think that if Stormgate is able to produce a successful esports scene, that will kill StarCraft, or do you think that those two communities can coincide for a bit?
It's really difficult to answer because we don't know the future, but also we specifically don't know if Microsoft is ever going to do anything, because that would really throw a wrench into whatever I'm thinking of. Let's say a world where Microsoft doesn't do anything or doesn't go through with the acquisition. Yeah, it eventually would, because you would just, it would be the easiest thing to answer, because you would have a video game that actually continues building and improving and listening to the community, and a video game that doesn't. It's like, even the best video game in the world is eventually going to fall out of people's daily livelihoods, right? If there's not going to be new stuff to do. And once it's gone, it's kind of, it's gone for a while. So I don't think, again, if Microsoft's not at all involved, I don't think StarCraft 2 will just disappear off the face of the earth. I think we'll have actually a decent, if ESL continues with the current plan too, let's say this is the plan for 2024 and 2025, my expectation would be that obviously 23 looks pretty much like it does now, even though Stormgate's supposed to have something soon. And 2024 would also look pretty similar for Europe and North America. I think Koreans are probably the most likely to be like, oh, goodbye. And then 25, I would guess, is when StarCraft 2 hits a considerable decline in player base, because the pros have declined and the tournament numbers have declined and the excitement has declined. And Stormgate is proven, or not proven, I guess, either way, what it can be. But if Microsoft gets involved, I think there's actually a really big chance that they inject StarCraft 2 again. And that actually I could see creating problems for Stormgate, which I haven't heard many people discuss. But if Microsoft came in and doesn't make StarCraft 3, because that would take way too long, but starts to include co-op commanders in like the Xbox Pass, and starts to balance again and puts in money like they do for Age of Empires, gets us in a castle or whatever, a spaceship, I guess. I think that would actually kind of hurt Stormgate's main appeal, right? Because kind of, if we're being really truthful, Stormgate's main appeal is that it's continuing on StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
Not exactly, but basically that's what it's doing. But if StarCraft 2 continues on, then why would we need a sub StarCraft 2?
Yeah, I mean that's actually like Harsum in my interview with him said that verbatim, right? He said like
Okay.
StarCraft, Stormgate is going to be StarCraft 3 spiritually. Like that's the view of the
Yeah.
community, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I think that's an excellent point. I guess another question I had was, do you think a big developer provided prize pool is enough to catch a lot of eyeballs in terms of mainstream viewers? Like, do you think if Stormgate comes to market with $1 million global finals,
Mm.
do you think that would trounce those 20K, 40K figures, or do you think not so much?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. The kind of assumption from me behind all of that spiel that I gave you was that Stormgate really wouldn't have that. They are funded, they're well funded. I think people kind of, confused because they're not Blizzard, they're like, automatically indie, and I'm not sure that's how that works. But anyways, I don't think you can put all that much money into big prize pools, flashiness, basically. Already a lot of their kind of advertising is done by goodwill almost,
Free. Yeah.
So, but if that was the scenario, if $1 million is on the line, I do think they would draw a lot of attention. I think if, I'm a terrible business person, probably. But if they were to even ask me, like, hey, we have this much money, where should we allocate it? I might actually say put it into this big blowout thing once you know that your game's stable, anyways.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a fiasco. And then the second thing, if they couldn't do that, I think what would get really a lot of eyeballs is a well-established system with a confirmation for the future, is basically how I'm going to put it, right? I think that's going to get a lot of people interested if they can say, hey, we're not just going to have a fairly large prize at the end of this year, because that's going to be our world tournament. By the way, we have a world tournament, and here's how you get to that world tournament, and here's how you get into the smaller tournaments. They actually establish a system, give decent money, and do have kind of want to pop off final global finals. I think that gives a lot of people a lot of reason to cheer. Not just the hardcore people. Obviously, esports is always more for the hardcore, but I also think that really helps with the casuals, to a certain extent, and they're going to be able to finally put the shit on like their launcher, right? We're not going to have Blizzard problems, so they're going to do a much better job of intertwining that excitement that comes with esports events with the casual audience. I don't think you have to be super hardcore to appreciate when people are excited about something. Yeah. So it really does go hand in hand for me. So that would be my two hopes: $1 million tournament right off the bat.
Yeah, no, I mean,
or
that
a really
would be
well-established system.
Huh. Yeah, cool. I'm glad I was able to float that idea by you. But okay, yeah, I think we pretty much covered anything. The 15 to 30 minute interview turned out to be an hour.
As they do.
But I really appreciate you taking the time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, excellent questions. Hope it went well.
Oh yeah, I think so. Any closing words?
Oh, not too much. I think just try and stick with the positives, right? For everyone who's worried about StarCraft, I think the gist is that we're trying to make the game exciting. We're trying to give you the moments that we've had this last year, like at Atlanta and Katowice. The community energy was just so amazing, and we want to keep encouraging that. And then if you want to keep building StarCraft, it's going to have to come down a lot to the grassroots, the community tournaments. And we can hope that Stormgate's great, and we can hope that Microsoft loves us. So, yeah, there's things to look forward to. Don't worry about it.
No doubt. Anyway, thank you so much.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.